Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about some of the players and coaches under a big-time microscope in week 2. I think Quinn Ewers might take the cake on that one, going up to Ann Arbor with a lot on his shoulders, not only for this season, but possibly some draft implications in this one as well. But going to be really fun to watch that unfold. Let's get into some of my best bets for the week 2 slate. I think this is something that I'm going to do throughout the year, kind of keep track of where I'm at, what my record is, and if you want to follow me, you're more than welcome to. I want this to be known. I am not a betting man. I never really have been. I've watched this game just because I'm a weirdo and I really just love watching the game more than anything else. I'll watch games that do not matter to me and I don't have money on. It's one of those things that makes me a little bit weird in the college football world. But at the end of the day, I do think these are a couple of bets that I feel pretty good about. I do think these are bets that definitely have a very good chance of hitting. I don't want to say anything too crazy, but at the end of the day, if you do take my advice, you're more than welcome to. But just don't blame me if things go wrong because I am someone that is still getting used to this betting game myself. But let's get into this a little bit. And I think when you look at the week 2 slate, there are a lot of games that feel like they're sitting on lines that are dangerous. You know, that 7.5, 14.5 that you don't really want to jump at, or you want to jump out in the other direction because it's right above that big time number. And it's something that you'll hear about a lot when it comes to bets is crossing those big time numbers when some lines shift. And it happened in the Texas Clemson game where you went from 3 points to 7.5. That's a huge flip from you go over 6, you go over 7, and this game changes very quickly in a hurry. But let's start with that game, but I'm not going to go after the line. I think under in this game is a huge bet. 42.5 is the line, and I think when you look at this one, I thought the over-under was spot on when I did this prediction. The closer and closer I get to this game, I think it's going to be an absolute rock fight, at least to start. I think it's one of those games that we could look up at halftime and see kind of a Georgia Clemson type score, whether it's like 10-3 or maybe even, 6-0. Maybe it's exactly like Clemson, Georgia, where you have a really ugly offense. You have defenses playing really good football early on, and then one team finds it. Whether it's, Michigan or Texas in that second half, one team is able to find it and separate a little bit, but just too much ground to make up in the second half to get to that 42.5 number. So another part of this that I think is getting overlooked, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the show, but Michigan has heard all of the noise. They've heard every single person that isn't wearing a Michigan hat pick Texas in this game and pick Texas to cover in this game, and I did as well. I'm falling into that trap as well, but at the end of the day, I think it's one of those games where the defense knows that they have to play pretty much lights out for them to win this one. The offense I think, will be better this week. I think it has so long to go to get to a place where they're going to be able to win games offensively. So the defense knows what they have to do, and I think they're going to come out swinging. I do think Texas wears them down a little bit in the second half and is able to get just enough plays to win this one, but I think this one could be ugly for about 2.5 quarters, and then some offense starts to open up late. Over I like is one that I'm getting caught in a trap here, guys. I feel very confident that I'm getting caught in a trap because it's 35.5. It is the Cy-Hawk Trophy battle, and it's one of those games where the under hits all the time. Picking it over on an Iowa team just feels like an idiotic thing to do regardless. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to buy into it. And I think the biggest thing for me is this Iowa offense is better. I don't think it's all that much better. I think you're going to come back down to earth slowly throughout this season. But the biggest difference is you have 2 wide receivers that they actually have to worry about. You don't have guys on the outside that you can pretty much just put single coverage, say they're going to be fine out there, and even if they're not fine, the Iowa quarterback isn't going to be able to make that throw. So overall, I think it's one of those things where Iowa isn't all that different than they were a year ago in terms of approach. What they are different in is a little bit of personnel, and that's all they needed to switch. They needed to add more wide receivers into the personnel packages and take out more tight ends. Then you spread out defenses, then things become a little bit easier to run the ball. So I do think it's one of those games that you would obviously look at this and say this is going to be an under. You would obviously look at Iowa and say anything is going to be under regardless of the number. I'm going to get into this one a little bit. I think Iowa State has too many dudes to outright stop, whether it's Noel or Higgins or Sama. I think keeping them under wraps for 4 quarters is just too tall of an order. I don't think it's going to be a shootout by any means, but maybe if you're in terms of the Cy-Hawk Trophy, it's definitely a shootout. I do have it 24-20, so I think it's going to be a really fun game, but at the end of the day, I'm picking a little bit more points in this one than people might expect. Another over I love is that Tennessee-NC State game. I think I look at this game and you have so many different questions about the offense for NC State and the defense for NC State as well. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest question for both of these teams is the back end of those defenses are not good. They're, a little bit young on the Tennessee side. I think on the NC State side, they're just still trying to find themselves. But overall, just don't necessarily have the great personnel that they love to have. This is going to be a very interesting game, and I think Tennessee is going to be tested sideline to sideline. When you have someone like Kevin Concepcion on the other side, it's going to be really, really hard to keep him under wraps the entire game because he can attack you from literally every single point on the field. He could line up in the backfield and make a problem for you, and then right when you feel like you have a beat on getting out to the edge and making those tackles out in coverage, Justin Jolie is going to hit you over the middle on a seam route. So it's one of those moments where I think NC State just has enough counter punches. I don't think they're going to necessarily score a ton of points against Tennessee by any means, but I do think they have the ability to kind of negate the pass rush for Tennessee and get it out on the edge with all of these electric wide receivers and score enough. And then on the other side, Tennessee is just going to dominate the middle of the field in this game. NC State showed no ability to stop the deep crossers, posts that Josh Heupel loves to run, and if Nico can put it the way he was in Week 1, it's going to be cruel to the NC State defense. So I expect a lot of points. I think this one's going to be really fun, but at the end of the day, I do think Tennessee wins this one by a comfortable margin. I've been trying to talk myself into NC State, and I think they're going to play much cleaner football this week. I just think it's one of those things where you walk onto the field with a Tennessee offense like this, it's going to be impossible to keep a cap on it. When you have Chris Brazzell and you have Squirrel White, you have Brew McCoy, you have Chaz Nimrod, you have Dante Thornton, a million people is the problem here, where NC State can do everything right on the defensive side of the ball. Everyone can play their assignment. Everyone can be on time and make good tackles and all of that stuff. And then Tennessee can change the game in a second with one big play. So it's one of those games where you look at it, and I love to say that NC State's going to keep it close. And frankly, I think it could be close for a lot of this game. I just think Tennessee's going to make those one or two big plays down the stretch of this game to win this one by 14, 21 points, 17 maybe points in this one. Now, Tony Gibson does rock. We talked about him earlier on the show. He can do a ton, but I don't love the personnel. I just think it's one of those things that you could play call as well as you possibly want to. I don't think you're going to be able to get it done. And then for defense, I think Tennessee just has more dudes. You have James Pierce Jr., Bryson Eason, you have Arian Carter, enough guys to make enough plays to give them a little bit of a cushion in this game and give them that extra position that means a whole lot. And then Boise State, I love BYU plus 11.5 against SMU tonight. I think Friday nights are weird, and I think SMU has still not figured out what that quarterback situation is going to be. No one is talking about BYU coming into this one. This just feels like one of those college football moments. I do like their quarterback, Jake Retzlaff. I think he's a very talented kid and one of those guys that looked clunky last year, but now is comfortable in this offense and is finding Chase Roberts a lot, which is very, very good way to go about business if you're BYU. I think SMU has a good chance in this game to win it, but I think it might just have to be in comeback fashion. I think BYU comes out of the gate pretty fast, and then SMU finds their footing and likely gets a win. But I think it's one of those games tonight that are going to be really sneaky fun, and you're going to want to tune in because I think it's going to be a little bit closer than some people think. I like Oregon to blow out Boise State, and that 21.5 is making me outright terrified to make this pick. I'll be totally honest, because 21 feels like that perfect number, but at the end of the day, I do think this is a statement game for Oregon. Oregon still is Oregon. Like, we talked about this team all offseason as one of the most talented, complete teams in the country. That didn't go away in a week. Now, there are issues that you maybe didn't think were going to happen for Oregon through 1 week, but at the end of the day, they're going to be able to play really good football. I feel really good, really confident in that. I think some of their problems are a little bit longer term, but most of them I think are temporary. And I think Dylan Gabriel's going to come out, be able to play a little bit better. I think they run the ball a lot better against a Boise State defense that was downright bad last week, and I think they have the ability to just pull away in this game. I think they're going to show the AP poll that they belong closer to 3, not to 7, and I think it's one of those games where Dan Lanning's really mad right about now, and I think it's going to show on Saturday. I do have App State covering the spread against Clemson. I talked about this last week, or yesterday. Clemson just doesn't have enough offensively for me to feel confident about them pulling away at all against any team in the country right now. It's one of those teams where the freshman wide receivers can come along. There's no doubt about that. Cade Klubnik can play better football, or they can put him in better, more advantageous situations. I don't know if it changes this offense all that much anyway. I think App State has an ability to say, if it's going to be Phil Maffa, fine. We'll take Phil Maffa. We'll take him out of the game. We'll make sure that he is not a factor. Outside of that, just beat us. Just dare Cade Klubnik to beat you, because frankly, he has not done it yet. And I get this isn't Georgia. It's a very different game. But at the end of the day, I really like App State to keep this one close. I do think Clemson is going to win, but I don't think it's going to be pretty at all. I think they're going to walk out of that game feeling really, really precarious about the ACC schedule, and I think everyone's going to be saying it's still Miami and everyone else in the ACC, at least for the time being. I do like Houston to cover this one, and this is another one that makes me scared because Houston played not only bad football last week, just horrific football last week against UNLV. They got dominated in every single aspect of that game, and then Oklahoma on the other side. The O-line was a little bit iffy, but other than that, they were dominant against Temple. So it's making me a little bit nervous, but I think it's one of those games. And I don't think Oklahoma's really going to... I think when you look at this game at the end of it, you look at the box score, you're going to say, okay, Oklahoma took care of business. But I think when you look up at halftime, you're going to see a closer game than you expect. I think Donovan Smith is one of those guys that plays terrible football one week and then plays great football the next, a classic college football quarterback. But I do expect Oklahoma to win. I just think that O-line has just enough holes for Houston to exploit early on in that game, and then they pull away late, win by 17, 21 points. But at the end of the day, Houston is able to at least give them a little bit of a scare in Norman. But a ton of really, really fun games. I think you look at all of these bets, there are a lot that are on some very precarious lines, including that game, which one was I? That Oregon game that's at 21.5 right now. That one scares me a lot, but I do like Oregon to cover that spread. I do think they're going out there to make a statement this week, so we'll continue with that throughout the season. We'll give you an update on how I'm doing, and we'll see if would be a good bettor or not, but I am not necessarily a betting man right now, so I'm not necessarily expecting too much, but going to be really fun to kind of unpack this throughout the season. But I'll give you my my first couple there, and then in the second segment, I do want to get into, or in the next segment, excuse me, I do want to get into all of the questions I have heading into week 2. We have a lot of teams that didn't play all that great or played awesome in week 1. Where does the regression to the mean or progression to the mean happen this upcoming week is something we're going to have to figure out, and we'll do it right after this, so stick with us.